Okay, so we are reading the Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. We are on chapter 3, A Matter of Energy.
Page 27 of the PDF.
Page 53 of the book.
A matter of energy. We rose at dawn and drove east all morning in virtual silence. Early on, Will had mentioned that we would drive straight across the Andes into what he called the High Selva, an area consisting of forest covered foothills and plateaus, but he had said little else. I had asked him several questions about his background and about our destination, but he had politely put me off, indicating he wanted to concentrate on driving. Finally, I had stopped talking altogether and had focused instead on the scenery. The views from the mountain peaks were staggering. About noon, when we had reached the last of the towering ridges, we stopped at an overlook to eat a lunch of sandwiches in the jeep and to gaze out at the wide, barren valley ahead. On the other side of the valley were smaller foothills, green with plant life. As we ate, Will said we would spend the night at the Vicient Lodge, an old 19th century estate which formerly belonged to the Spanish Catholic Church. Vicient was now owned by a friend of his, he explained, and was operated as a resort specializing in business and scientific conferences. With only that brief explanation, we departed and rode silently. An hour later, we arrived at the Vicient, entering the property through a large iron and stone gate and proceeding northeast up a narrow gravel drive. Once more, I asked a few probing questions concerning Vicien and why we were here, but as he had done earlier, Will brushed aside my inquiries. Only this time he suggested outright that I focus on the landscape.
So now what was happening? He didn't want to really feed the author or the hero of our book, and he wanted him to start becoming aware. So he said, focus on the landscape, feel the energy of the landscape. That was what he was actually wanting to do.
Colorful pastures and
Shobla,
orchards.
you were not audible. So immediately the beauty.
Immediately, the beauty of Vicien touched me. We were surrounded by colorful pastures and orchards, and the grass seemed unusually green and healthy. It grew thickly even under the giant oaks that rose up every 400 feet or so throughout the pastures. Something about these huge trees seemed incredibly attractive, but I couldn't quite grasp what.
So now what was happening here? Okay. So now if you really see, the grass was growing under the trees also. So when you have a high energy field somewhere, plants automatically start growing better. I think Kavita Didi will vouch for this, that when you start energetically cleaning up the environment for plants, they automatically start growing in a healthier way. And of course, the trees, the big trees, the huge trees, they definitely have a lot of energy, and they are very powerful and beautiful grounding tools. So after the workshops, we tell people, go and hug a tree. In fact, in many, I remember when we conducted this workshop in Hyderabad, there were two trees outside the venue. So when we reached, most of them had already done the excursion. So in the focus 10 and 12, they didn't have a problem. When we started hitting focus 15, then people started, getting a little woozy. So we used to constantly tell them, anyone getting a little woozy, go and hug a tree. They used to come back absolutely grounded. So grounding is very powerfully done with these trees, and the trees can give us a lot of information. A lot of information can come from trees because they've seen a lot. Okay, so that's what she's saying. These huge trees seem incredibly attractive. When you connect with the energy, these trees really feel attractive.
After about a mile, the road went east and up a slight rise. At the bottom of the knoll was the lodge, a large Spanish style building constructed of hewn timbers and grey stone. The structure appeared to contain at least 50 rooms and a large screen porch covered the entire south wall. The yard around the lodge was marked by more gigantic oaks and contained beds of exotic plants and walkways trimmed with dazzling flowers and ferns. Groups of people talked idly on the porch and among the trees. As we got out of the vehicle, Will lingered a moment and gazed out at the view. Beyond the lodge to the east, the land sloped gradually downward and then flattened into the meadows and forests. Another range of foothills appeared bluish purple in the distance. You're going you're going to like this place. No kidding, I said. As he walked away, he turned and looked at me. Be sure to check out the research gardens. I'll see you at dinner time. Will was obviously leaving me alone for some reason, but I didn't care why. I felt great and not the least bit apprehensive.
So this is important over here. This is important. I felt great and not the least bit apprehensive. So when you go into a space which has a good energetic field, automatically you start getting aligned and in equanimity. So that's why it's very important to have a clean energy field in the environment that we are living in. And that is what technically Vastu is all about.
Will had already told me that because of the substantial tourist dollar Vicient brought into the country, the government had always taken a hands off approach to the place, even though the manuscript was often discussed here. Several large trees and a winding path towards the south attracted me, so I walked that way. Once I reached the trees, I could see that the walkway proceeded through a small iron gate and down several tiers of stone steps to a meadow filled with wild flowers. In the distance was an orchard of some kind and a small creek and more forest land. At the gate, I stopped and took several deep breaths, admiring the beauty below. It's certainly lovely, isn't it? A voice from behind asked. I turned quickly. A woman in her late 30s carrying a hiking pack stood behind me. It certainly is, I said. I've never seen anything quite like it. For a moment, we looked out at the open fields at the carrying a hiking pack. Sorry. For a moment, we looked out at the open fields and at the cascading tropical plants in the terraced beds on each side of us. Then I asked, do you happen to know where the research gardens are? Sure, she said. I'm heading that way now. I'll show you. After introducing ourselves, we walked down the steps and onto the well worn path heading south. Her name was Sarah Lohner, and she was sandy haired and blue eyed and could have been described as girlish except for her serious demeanor. We walked for several minutes in silence. Is this your first visit here? She asked. Yes, it is, I replied. I don't know much about this place. Well, I've been here on and off for almost a year now, so I can fill you in a bit. A- About 20 years ago, this estate became popular as a sort of international scientific hangout. Various scientific organizations had their meetings here, biologists and physicists mainly. Then a few years ago, she hesitated for an instant and looked at me. Have you heard of the manuscript that was discovered here in Peru? Yes, I have. I've heard about the first two insights. I wanted to tell her how fascinated I was with the document, but I held back, wondering whether to trust her completely. I thought maybe that was the case, she said. It looked as if you were picking up on the energy here.
So again, she is sensitive, right? She's been visiting the place, so she can sense the energy. Will is just connecting with the energy, so that's why there's a question of trust. When you are connected with the energy, you have an understanding, the feel of whether you can trust someone or not. Okay, that actually happens, and it comes to you.
We were crossing a wooden bridge which traversed the creek. What energy? I asked. She stopped and leaned back against the railing of the bridge. Do you know anything about the third insight? Nothing. It describes a new understanding of the physical world. It says we humans will learn to perceive what was formerly an invisible type of energy. The lodge has become a gathering place for those scientists interested in studying and talking about this phenomenon.
So again, the third insight has just come to him very, very synchronistically.
Then scientists think this energy is real? I asked. She was turning to walk across the bridge. Only a few, she said, and we take some heat for it. You're a scientist then. I teach physics at a small college in Maine. So why are some scientists disagreeing with you? She was silent for a moment as if in thought. You have to understand the history of science, she said, glancing at me to ask, as if to ask whether I wanted to get deeper into the subject. I nodded for her to proceed. Think about the second insight for a moment. After the fall of the medieval worldview, we in the West suddenly became aware that we lived in a totally unknown universe.
So what was it? In the second insight, Shimangla, you have to reduce your volume in the speaker volume. So in the second insight, it talked about history of how or how growth took place on the material sense in the world. So we shifted totally from the spiritual side into the material side. From the right side of the brain, we shifted into the left side of the brain, totally dependent on logic. Okay, so this is what she's talking about here. Now, also what happened when we shifted to logic, then the control of the church was directing everything. That what are the niyams, what are the kanuns, what are the rules that you need to follow. The church was formulating all the rules. But when the logic started coming into the picture, the control of the church dropped from the system.
In attempting to understand the nature of this universe, we knew we had to somehow separate fact from superstition. In this regard, we scientists assumed a particular attitude known as scientific skepticism, which in effect demands solid evidence for any new assertion about how the world works. Before we would believe anything, we wanted evidence that could be seen and grabbed with the hands. Any idea that couldn't be proven scientifically served us well with the more obvious phenomena in nature, with objects such as rocks and bodies and trees, objects everyone can perceive, no matter how skeptical they are.
Okay, now just 1 second. Shivangla, 1 second. Now, again, science demands physical evidence. It demands that what experiments are done, it's repeated. But when we are going into the subtle realms, I mean, this is talking about from the Newtonian physics point of view. Now, as we go into the subtle realms and the non physical realms, then proving something gets more and more difficult. Number one, we are restricted by the calibrations that our instruments can make. So as instruments are getting more and more sophisticated, the more and more we are being able to sense these fields. We are more and more we are being able to assess what these subtle fields or energy fields are all about. Okay.
We quickly went out and named every part of the physical world, attempting to discover why the universe operated as it did. We finally concluded that everything that occurs in nature does so according to some natural law.
So this is basically Newtonian physics. Every and each action has an equal and opposite reaction. Things are made out of matter. So we were reaching till that stage only. Shimangla, we can't hear you.
I'm lost because you stopped me in the middle of a sentence, so I don't know. We quickly went out and named every part of the physical world, attempting to discover why the universe operated as it did. We finally concluded that everything that occurs in nature does so according to some natural law, that each event has a direct physical and understandable cause. She smiled at me knowingly. You see, in many ways, scientists have not been that different from others in our time period. We decided, along with everyone else, to master this place in which we found ourselves.
So again, over here, 1 second, Shimangla, please mark your place. Okay, so now what is happening here? We decided along with everyone else to master this place in which we found ourselves. So what does this mean? We wanted to learn about everything and how it works so that we can control things around us. So it was all a matter of control. The materialistic attitude is about controlling everything around us.
The idea was to create an understanding of the universe that made the world seem safe and manageable, and the skeptical attitude kept us focused on concrete problems that would make our existence seem more secure.
So now what does this mean? The idea was to create an understanding of the universe that made it seem more safe and manageable. So we wanted to make what was around us a known so that we would feel safe. Where do we feel a little, shaky and scared? When something is unknown. So we went around totally dedicating ourselves to make everything around us a known.
We had followed the meandering path from the bridge through a small meadow and into an area more densely covered with trees. With this attitude, she went on, science systematically removed the uncertain and the esoteric from the world.
So again, over here, 1 second. Now, over here again, what happened? First, the church was giving directives to everything. Now, as we shifted to science, all the doctrines that were professed by the church were removed. Okay, so the esoteric form of the world was actually removed, and everything became 1 plus 1 is equal to 2.
We concluded, following the thinking of Isaac Newton, that the universe always operated in a predictable manner like an enormous machine, because for a long time that's all it could be proved to be. Events which happened simultaneously to other events, yet had no causal relationship, were said to occur only by chance.
So what does this imply? It implies the timeline. That means we are only going towards the future. And there's a cause and effect, okay, of a particular event. So it was just going in a linear fashion. The holistic view of everything is happening for a bigger reason and there's a bigger plan went out of the window.
Then two investigations occurred which opened our eyes again to the mystery in the universe. Much had been written over the past several decades about the revolution in physics, but the changes really stemmed from two major findings, those of quantum mechanics and those of Albert Einstein.
So again, E is equal to mc square was Albert Einstein, and quantum physics was Bohr and other scientists who came out with the quantum physical ideas.
The whole of Einstein's life's work was to show that what we perceive as hard matter is mostly empty space with a pattern of energy running through it.
So
This includes ourselves.
E is equal to mc squared. So energy is equal to mass into velocity squared. Okay. So if something has more energy, it has more mass and more velocity. So either one of these, if you know two of the parts of it, you can calculate the third.
This includes ourselves. And what quantum physics has shown is that when we look at these patterns of energy at smaller and smaller levels, startling results can be seen. Experiments have revealed that when you break apart small aspects of this energy, what we call elementary particles, and try to observe how they operate, the act of observation itself alters the results.
So what
As
does
if
this mean?
these
In quantum physics, if a different experimenter is doing the experiment, the results will be different because the experimenter influences the result. So what the person is thinking will influence the result.
experiments have revealed that when you break apart small aspects of this energy, what we call elementary particles, and try to observe how they operate, the act of observation itself alters the results, as if these elementary particles are influenced by what the experimenter expects.
So this is also very important. What the experimenter expects. So if I have an agenda to look for something, that is what I will find because that is what I will notice. So whatever the experimenter is looking for, the results will be screened towards that. So taking an empirical attitude towards an experiment becomes a very, very difficult case scenario in this. This is also an issue when a study, most of the studies proving something is not bad, are sponsored by the person who is manufacturing that. Okay. So those studies automatically get screened towards proving that what is right for the manufacturer because the scientist or the person who's doing the investigation is being paid by that particular person. So like the sugar industry did a study where sugar was not bad. Okay, but it was sponsored by the sugar industry. Coca-Cola sponsored this thing that Coca-Cola is not bad, and they found it was not bad. Why? Because Coca-Cola sponsored it. Okay, so on and so forth.
This is true even if the particles must appear in places they couldn't possibly go, given the laws of the universe as we know them. Two places at the same moment, forward or backward in time, that sort of thing.
So what this is now going into holistic mechanics. Okay, the particle has the possibility to exist in multiple locations at the same time. But if they are observed, then they exist where they exist. So this is the classic case of the slit light experiment, where they shine a light through one slit and the light goes only on one spot, or they make a hole and it comes only on one spot. Then they make two slits and they shine a light and then a wave forms. So the light goes everywhere, and the light can operate as a particle and as a wave simultaneously. So when it is in the wave form, infinite possibilities exist in where it can land. But when it becomes a particle due to observation, then it remains only in one spot. So the observing aspect of any experiment makes a shift in the results of the experiment.
She stopped to face me again. In other words, the basic stuff of the universe at its core is looking like a kind of pure energy that is malleable to human intention and expectation in a way that defies our old mechanistic model of the universe, as though our expectation itself causes our energy to flow out into the world and affect other energy systems, which of course is exactly what the third insight would lead us to believe.
So again, why are we constantly saying, watch your thoughts, watch your thoughts? Why? Because our thoughts are what is going out in the universe. And if you've thought it, it's already gone into the universe. And very clearly is saying that is a, in other words, the basic stuff of the universe at its core is looking like a pure energy that is malleable to human intention and expectation. So, if we are expecting something, that is what will result. And if we look at our thoughts, most of the time, what are we expecting? We are expecting things to go wrong. We are not talking or thinking in an uplifting manner. We are constantly looking and talking in a depleting manner. So watching our thoughts become extremely important, especially when we are going into these expanded states of consciousness or we are going into subtle energy fields.
She shook her head. Unfortunately, most scientists don't take this idea seriously. They would rather remain skeptical and wait to see if we can prove it. Hey Sarah, here we are, over here. A voice called faintly from a distance. To the right, about 50 yards through the trees, we could see someone waving. Sarah looked at me. I need to go talk with those guys for a few minutes. I have a translation of the third insight with me. If you would like to pick out a spot and read some of it while I'm gone. I sure would, I said. She pulled a folder from her pack, handed it to me, and walked away. I took the folder and looked around for a place to sit down. Here, the forest floor was dense with small bushes and was slightly soggy. But to the east, the land rose towards what looked like another knoll. I decided to walk in that direction in search of dry ground. At the top of the rise, I was awestruck. It was another spot of incredible beauty. The gnarled oaks were spaced about 50 feet apart, and the wide limbs grew completely together at the top, creating a canopy overhead. On the forest floor grew broadleaf tropical plants which stood 4 or 5 feet high and had leaves up to 10 inches in width. These plants were interspersed with large ferns and bushes lush with white flowers. I picked out a dry place and sat down. I could smell the musty odor of the leaves and the fragrance of the blossoms.
So what was he doing? He was connecting with the energy of the earth. So now he started to appreciate beauty. Okay. So appreciation, whenever we go into appreciation, we shift from the left side of the resilience grid to the right side.
I opened the folder and turned to the beginning of the translation. A brief introduction explained that the third insight brings a transformed understanding of the physical universe. Its words clearly echoed Sarah's summary. Sometime near the end of the second millennium, it predicted, humans would discover a new energy which formed the basis of and radiated outward from all things, including ourselves.
So everything around us has an energy field and it can be measured. It can be photographed now. Okay.
I pondered that idea for a moment, then read something that fascinated me. The manuscript said the human perception of this energy first begins with a heightened sensitivity to beauty. As I thought about this, the sound of someone walking along the path below drew my attention. I saw Sarah at the exact moment she looked towards the knoll and spotted me. This place is great, she said when she reached me. Have you come to the part about the perception of beauty yet? Yes, I said, but I'm not sure what that means.
So again, what is she saying? That when you start perceiving beauty, you start raising your own energy level also. So one of the ways to shift from the left side to the right side of the grid is to remember something which touches your heart. And most of the time, nature has a means of doing that because very little negativity is attached with any kind of a scene in nature that you have. Okay, so it's easier to get into that appreciation and create that shift in you when you start appreciating beauty.
Further in the manuscript, she said, it goes into more detail, but I'll explain it briefly. The perception of beauty is a kind of barometer telling each of us how close we are to actually perceiving the energy. This is clear because once you observe this energy, you realize it's on the same continuum as beauty.
So yeah, so anything that is beautiful will have a good energetic field. and it'll affect you in very powerful ways.
You sound like you see it, I said. She looked at me without the slightest self consciousness. Yes, I do, but the first thing I developed was a deeper appreciation of beauty.
So again, the first step to being able to perceive energy is to start going into appreciation. So when you start going into appreciation, you start focusing on the item that you're appreciating, and that's when the energy field also starts to get visible to you.
But how does that work? Isn't beauty relative? She shook her head. The things that we perceive as beautiful may be different, but the actual characteristics we ascribe to beautiful objects are similar. Think about it. When something strikes us as beautiful, it displays more presence and sharpness of shape and vividness of color, doesn't it? It stands out, it shines, it seems almost iridescent compared to the dullness of other objects less attractive.
So
And
again, whenever something is beautiful and you start connecting with the beauty, it stands out. There'll be many things, but that one thing will just pop up and stand out when you connect with it. Anything which has a high energy field around.
I nodded. Look at the spot, she continued. I know you are blown away by it because we all are. This place leaps out at you. The colors and shapes seem magnifying. Well, the very next level of perception is to see an energy field hovering about everything.
So everything has a field around it, and it can be seen. When you train yourself, you can actually see that field. People who've done the Vastu program, we show them how to see that field also in the energy field aura and Vastu program.
I must have looked bewildered because she laughed, then said very seriously, perhaps we should walk on to the gardens. They're about half a mile further south. I think you'll find them interesting. I thanked her for taking the time to explain the manuscript to me, a total stranger, and for showing me around Vicien. She shrugged her shoulders. You seem like a person friendly to what we're trying to do, she said. And we all know we're involved in public relations effort here. For this research to continue, we must get the word out in the United States and elsewhere. The local authorities don't seem to like us much. Suddenly, a voice called out from behind, excuse me, please. We turned to see three men walking quickly up to the path towards us. All appeared to be in their late 40s and were dressed in stylish clothes. Would one of you tell me where the research gardens are? The taller of the three asked. Could you tell me what your business here is? Sarah asked in return. My colleagues and I have permission from the owner of this estate to examine the gardens and to speak with someone about the so called research being conducted here. We are from the University of Peru.
So again, so-called research, okay. So always the skeptics will debunk everything without actually indulging and actually looking at something in right in the front of it only they'll debunk it. This,
Sounds as though you're not in agreement with our findings, Sarah said, smiling, obviously trying to lighten the situation. Absolutely not, another of the men said. We think it is preposterous to claim that some mysterious energy can now be seen when it has never been observed before.
so now again, they are not at that conscious level, they are not in appreciation, so they are not going to be able to perceive the field. Now people who are in appreciation and are connected with that field can see the field. Now how can you explain to someone that the field is existing if that person is not at the consciousness level that the person can actually perceive it? So naturally now this becomes a quandary, and who's in authority? The guys who can't see it. So that becomes a huge problem. The same thing happened with the remote viewing program that was being conducted in the USA. The Senate department sent people to investigate what the remote view cell was doing, and they were not given enough authority to actually access the processes that they were actually conducting, or the sorties, or the tasks that they were meant to do. Okay, the remote viewing people. So naturally, they didn't see literally 95% of what the remote viewing cell was doing, and what they could see, they felt it was all bullshit. So the entire program was shut down. So this normally happens when you have someone who's not at that level of consciousness to be able to actually perceive what is happening and are put in a position of authority. They just attempt to debunk a lot of things. Yes, Aisha. Aisha, you have a question?
Hi. Yeah, yeah. No, I don't have a question. I just wanted to point out that obviously Sarah could see the energy fields of these men, because for the author, she immediately and wholeheartedly wanted to take him along and show him and explain to him. Whereas
Correct.
with these guys, she said, "What is your work here?" So
Correct.
she could obviously see some negativity.
Naturally. So that is that
Yeah,
sense. When you start connecting with these fields, when you start operating at a higher state of consciousness, you can actually start perceiving what is happening with the other person. Now,
yeah.
at times it can become very, very problematic also, because you're actually starting to anticipate what the other guy is going to say. Now, there's a very thin line between actually getting intuition from below the line, which is your subconscious, and the higher state of consciousness, then from the mind. So you have to be able to discern that, what is coming from the conscious mind and what is coming from a deeper state of consciousness. That discernment is what the trick is all about, to be able to understand that.
Have you tried to see it? Sarah queried. The man ignored the question and asked again, Can you direct us to the gardens?
So now
Of
again, in spite of her asking, have you tried to see it? They are really not interested in even attempting to see it. They just want to do their work and get out. Okay, so to prove that everything is false and it's not possible. They've already decided that in our mind. So if you're not open to experimenting, you're not open to perceiving, and you are stuck, then no, this is it. And then everything is gone.
course, Sarah said. About 100 yards ahead, you will see a path turning east. Take it, and ahead may be a quarter of a mile you'll run into them. Thank you, the tall man said as they hurried on their way. You sent them in the wrong direction, I said. Not really, she replied. There are other gardens in that area, and the people there are more prepared to talk with these kind of skeptics. We get people like this through here occasionally, and not just scientists but curiosity seekers as well. People who can't begin to grasp what we are doing, which points out the problem that exists in scientific understanding. What do you mean? I asked. As I said before, the old skeptical attitude was great when exploring the more visible and obvious phenomena in the universe, such as trees or sunshine or thunderstorms. But there is another group of observable phenomena, more subtle, that you can't study in fact. You can't even tell that they are there at all unless you suspend your or bracket your skepticism and try every way possible to perceive them. Once you can, then you return to your rigorous study.
You have
Interesting,
to
I said.
be able to see something. The first thing is drop the skepticism. Be open to at least experimenting and understanding. Then you can go back into your studying the phenomenon to say that how it operates.
As I said before, the old skeptical attitude was great when exploring the more visible and obvious phenomena in the universe, such as trees or sunshine or thunderstorms. But there is another group of observable phenomena more subtle that you can't study in fact. You can't even tell they are there at all unless you suspend or bracket your skepticism and try every possible way to perceive them. Once you can, then you return to your rigorous study. Interesting, I said. Ahead, the woods ended, and I could see dozens of cultivated plots, each one growing a different type plant. Most seemed to be food bearing types, everything from bananas to spinach. At the eastern border of each crop was a wide gravel path, which ran north to what appeared to be a public road. Three metal outbuildings were spaced along the path. 4 or 5 people worked near each one. I see some friends of mine, Sarah said, and pointed towards the closest building. Let's go over there. I'd like for you to meet them. Sarah introduced me to the 3 men and 1 woman, all of whom were involved in the research. The men spoke with me briefly, then excused themselves to continue their work. But the woman, a biologist named Marjorie, seemed free to talk. I caught Marjorie's eye. What exactly are you researching here? I asked. She appeared to be taken off guard, but smiled and finally answered. It's hard to know where to start, she said. Are you familiar with the manuscript? The first sections of it, I commented. I've just begun the third insight. Well, that's what we're all about here. Come on, I'll show you. She motioned for me to follow her, and we walked around the metal building to a plot of beans. I noticed they appeared to be exceptionally healthy, with no noticeable insect damage or dead leaves. The plants were growing in what appeared to be a highly humous, almost fluffy soil, and each plant was carefully spaced, the stems and leaves of one growing near but never touching those of the next.
So again, no noticeable insect damage or dead leaves. Okay. So when the energy field of a plant is high, then insects also don't attack them. This is given in this book, The Secret Life of Plants, and there's another book called Secret Life of the Soil. It's these experiments were carried out in when they did a lot of experiments, and it's there in those two books. Amazing books, both of them.
She pointed to the closest plant. We tried to look at these plants as total energy systems and think of everything they need to flourish: soil, nutrients, moisture, light. What we have found is that the total ecosystem around each plant is really one living system, one organism, and the health of each of the parts impacts on the health of the whole.
So again, you cannot isolate one thing from the other. So there was a story about this farmer who used to grow the biggest pumpkins in the US. And what used to happen was he always or pumpkins or sorry, watermelons. And then he used to always organize a watermelon eating competition, and the seeds which were eaten in that competition, he used to collect the seeds, and he used to use those seeds to plant his next crop. And he, in the competition, he always gave his biggest and best watermelons for the competition. Also, he used to freely distribute his seeds to the farms which were near his farm. Now this farmer died, so when his sons or the other people took over the farm, they stopped the competition, or even if they had the competition, they used to give the shriveled up watermelons for the competitions, not giving the best watermelons. And they used to sell off the best watermelons. And they also never distributed their seeds to the farms beside them. Now, over a period of time, it was found that the crops or the watermelon sizes and the crop totally started to diminish. So, what was that first farmer doing? He was creating an environment where he got the best seeds for replanting. Number one, because the best watermelons seeds were used. Plus, cross pollination is there. So the if the farms beside his farm did not have good crop, then his plants would get pollinated by those plants, which would again create a problem for him. So he followed this the ecosystem process, by everything he had to take care of around himself or around his farm to be able to get a good crop. Even in that movie Avatar, we see that everything is interrelated and interconnected. You cannot take away one thing from the other.
She hesitated, then said, the basic point is that once we started thinking about the energy relationships all around the plant, then we started seeing amazing results. The plants in our studies were not particularly larger, but according to nutritional criteria, they were more potent. How was that measure? They contained more protein, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals.
So now what was this talking about? The process of going into this thing, what do you call it, organic farming, is resulting from this thing. The Secret Life of the Soil is very nice book on this process, that how to increase the potency and the nutritional value in the soil, which will result in healthier plants.
They, she looked at me expectantly, but that wasn't the most amazing thing. We found that the plants which had the most direct human attention were even more potent.
So again,
What
the plants have consciousness, and if attention is given to the plants are nurtured with love and care by a human person, they automatically will become more potent. Okay, so if you are like, there was a process which started talking to your plants. What was that meaning? That you were paying attention to your plants, and when you do that, the plants automatically became much better and more healthy.
what kind of attention? I asked. You know, she said, fiddling with the ground around them, checking them every day, that sort of thing. We set up an experiment with a control group, some getting special attention, others not, and the finding that was confirmed. What's more, she continued, we expanded the concept and had a researcher not give them attention but to mentally ask them to grow stronger. The person would actually sit with them and focus all his attention and concern on their growth.
So
Did
this
they grow stronger?
there was an experiment done with lab rats also, and these rats were given cancer drugs, and there was one particular guinea pig or rat who didn't get the cancer, and they were all wondering as to why it was happening. And then in the CC camera footage, it was caught that the night attendant used to come on a regular basis, and he had adopted that particular guinea pig, and he used to pet the guinea pig every night. So all the other guinea pigs, they got the cancer which was injected, but this one which was given attention and love and care did not get the cancer. Okay, so love and attention, care, and mentally telling someone to grow, an uplifting thought process automatically will affect the field, that the thing, that the plant, the object, or anything is lying there, or in that field, and it will get uplifted.
Did they grow stronger? By significant amounts, and they also grew faster. That's incredible. Yes, it is. Her voice trailed off as she watched an older man, appearing to be in his 60s, walk towards us. The gentleman approaching is a micronutritionist, she said discreetly. He came down here about a year ago for the first time and immediately took a leave of absence from the Washington State University. His name is Professor Haynes. He's done some great studies. As he arrived, I was introduced. He was a strongly built man with black hair, grey streaks at his temples. After some prodding from Marjorie, the professor began to summarize his research. He was most interested, he told me, in the functioning of the body's organs as measured by highly sensitive blood tests, especially as this functioning related to the quality of food eaten.
So again, uh, there is a process by which you can actually study the live blood, and it has been seen that within, I think, few minutes of your eating something, that thing automatically starts to circulate in the bloodstream. So what you're affecting definitely affects our entire body system.
He told me what interested him most were the results of a particular study which showed that while nutritionally rich plants of the kind grown at Vicient increase the body's efficiency dramatically, the increase was beyond what could be reasonably expected from the nutrients themselves as we understand how they work in human physiology. Something inherent in the structure of these plants created an effect not yet accounted for.
So what was that? That was the prana, that energy which was imbibed when you were eating the plant. The energy field is what we really get. Now, this also has been proven by Krillian photography that if you cut a fruit, the live fruit has a big field. You cut it, and slowly the energy field in that fruit will start to diminish. We actually have photographs. Maybe I'll show you. We talk about it in the energy field Vastu program. Through Krillian photography, you can actually see the field. So in fact, there's one picture with onion. So a silver or onion is cut and the field is taken. It's very bright. And every 5 minutes, the field is taken and you see that the energy field in that onion is diminishing. So if you cut a fruit and eat it later, the energy that you're imbibing in you automatically gets diminished. So it's always better to eat whole fruits or cut it and immediately eat it. If you store it for some time, the nutritional value will drop. I mean, not the nutritional value, the energetic value or the prana which is there in that food will automatically drop. This is what he's saying over here.
I looked at Marjorie, then asked. Then the focusing of attention on these plants gave them something that boosts human strength in return when they're eaten? Is this the energy mentioned in the manuscript? Marjorie looked at the professor. He gave me only half a smile. I don't know yet, he said. I asked him about his future research, and he explained that he wanted to duplicate the garden at Washington State and set up some long term studies to see if people eating these plants had more energy or were healthier over a longer period of time. As he spoke, I couldn't help glancing periodically at Marjorie. Suddenly, she looked incredibly beautiful. Her body appeared long and slender, even under her baggy jeans and t shirt. Her eyes and hair were dark brown, and her hair fell in tapered curls around her face.
So again, when we are looking at it from the scientific perspective, it takes a long time to get a study going, okay, and to prove something. And then even if you prove it, there'll be skeptics who will attempt to debunk it. So it's a very, very long, tedious process of proving it. Now, what is happening here? Now he suddenly starts to notice the beauty of Marjorie. She was always walking with them, but then suddenly he notices how beautiful it is. So he goes into literally appreciation of her beauty for the time being.
I felt a powerful physical attraction. At the exact moment I became aware of this attraction, she turned her head, stared directly into my eyes, and backed away from me a step.
Okay, so this was mentioned in the talk that Andrew Tang had given us, that how do we know when someone is looking at us? So our fields actually connect and we can sense that feeling that yes, someone is energetically looking at us and you immediately turn. So that's what's happening over here.
I've got to meet someone, she said. Maybe I'll see you later. She told Haynes goodbye, smiled coyly at me, and walked past the metal building and down the path.
So now what happened? Marjorie was sensitive to the energy field. So she sensed immediately that the hero was getting attracted to her, and it was not a very good attraction. It was a lustful kind of an attraction. So she quickly decided that I want to slip out of this field.
After a few more minutes of discussion with the professor, I wished him well and strolled back to where Sarah was standing. She was still talking intensely with one of the other researchers, but she followed me with her eyes as I walked. As I approached, the man she was with smiled, rearranged the notes on his clipboard, and walked into the building. Find out anything? Sarah asked. Yes, I said distractedly. It sounds like these folks are doing some interesting things. I was looking at the garden when she said, Where did Marjorie go? As I glanced up, I could see she had an amused look on her face.
So now he saw the interaction between him and Marjorie, and she actually saw because she could see the energetic fields, right? So she saw what was happening. That's why she's smiling over you.
Yes, I said distractedly. It sounds like these folks are doing some interesting things. Sorry. She said she had to meet someone. Did you turn her off? She asked, smiling now. I laughed. I guess I did, but I didn't say a thing. You didn't have to, she said. Marjorie could detect a change in your field. It was pretty obvious. I could see it all the way over here.
So now what happened? You did not need to say anything. The field changes the moment you even think of something. So the field changed, Marjorie sensed it, and Sarah could see it from a distance away.
A change in my what? In the energy field around your body. Most of us have learned to see them, at least in certain light. When a person has sexual thoughts, the person's energy field sort of swirls about and actually propels out towards the person who's the object of the attraction.
So what happened? He suddenly started having sexual thoughts about her and he was attracted to her. So his field projected out and attempted to connect with the field of Marjorie. And both the ladies could actually sense that shift in his field.
This struck me as a totally fantastic, but before I could comment, we were distracted by several people coming out of the metal building. Time now for the energy projections, Sarah said. You'll want to see this. We followed four young men, apparently students, to a plot of corn. As we walked closer, I realized that the plot was made up of two separate subplots, each about 10 feet square.
So now what?
The corn in one was about
One
2
second.
feet high.
So what does this mean? That you make one, you always have a control group. Whenever you're doing some kind of experiment, there's always a control group. So let us say you have a group of 20, 40 people. You divide them into two parts, and one part you'll give a certain medicine, the other part you won't. Or you may ask one group to do a certain thing and the other group not to do it. And then you will compare the results. So likewise, they had two plots of corn of 10 feet each. In one, they were projecting the energy, and in one, they were not doing anything. And they wanted to compare the results between the two of the fields.
The corn in one was about 2 feet high. In the other, the plants were less than 15 inches. The four men walked to the plot containing the taller corn, then sat down, each on one corner of the plot facing inwards. On cue, they all seemed to focus their eyes on the plants. The late afternoon sun shone from behind me, bathing the plot in soft amber light, yet the woods beyond remained dark in the distance. The plot of corn and the students were silhouetted against the almost black background.
So again, the best time to see the energy field is in twilight, because that gives you the best kind of field in which to be able to perceive these energy fields.
Sarah was standing beside me. This is perfect, she said. Look, can you see that? Should we stop here now?
Yeah, okay, we can stop. Chali, we can stop here. Anyone, anything? The experiment we'll see tomorrow. Anyone, anything? Anyone wants to say something? Okay, so we have the 9:15 talk today. Preeti will be coming to talk to us about the Gayatri Mantra and something she calls square breathing. Should be very interesting. We've also got meditation at 3:45.
Please note page 34 of the PDF.
Okay, page 34.
We begin with page 34.
I'll write it over here.
Thank you, Bhaiya. Ram Ram.
Hey, Ram Ram.
Thank you.
Priya. Ram Ram.
Call for meditation.
Thank you.
Ram Ram Bhaiya.
Ram Ram.
Thank you. See you.
See you.
Ram Ram.
Ram Ram.
Ram Ram.
Ram Ram, uncle.
Ram Ram, beta.